Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Timeline Divergence. I am your host, The Drifter, and in this series, we explore the ultimate what-ifs of history, uncovering the lost technologies, forgotten civilizations, and parallel realities that could have been. Today, we are looking at a world where the fundamental laws of space and time were completely rewritten, only to be allegedly erased from the public record. Close your eyes and imagine our modern reality in the year 2026. But in this specific timeline, the global logistics network operates without any physical friction. There are no rusted cargo ships burning heavy fuel across the Pacific Ocean. There are no bloody conflicts fought over oil pipelines or strategic ocean choke points. Global supply chains do not rely on crumbling highways or delayed cargo flights. Instead, the entire human civilization breathes through the backbone of instantaneous transit. Imagine stepping into a silent magnetic terminal in London, hearing the low hum of energy, and feeling the crisp morning air of Tokyo on your skin merely 3 seconds later. Heavy industrial machinery, emergency medical supplies, and unlimited fresh food are transported across the planet in the blink of an eye. This is a world where distance is completely dead and geopolitical borders are absolutely obsolete. This paradise of absolute efficiency is not a science fiction dream. It is the precise, logical evolution of a technology that was reportedly mapped out more than 80 years ago. If the electromagnetic displacement theories of the Philadelphia experiment had been allowed to flourish, our reality would definitely be a utopia of boundless freedom. The true mastery of the unified field would be the ultimate liberation of humanity. We would never know the crushing burden of global shipping costs, or the engineered panic of scarce resources. But that timeline died in the autumn of 1943. It was locked away, officially labeled a myth, and replaced by the restricted reality we suffer today. Let us pull back from that lost paradise and return to the restricted reality we navigate today. That timeline of absolute freedom died in the autumn of 1943. Let us travel back to the exact moment the timeline fractured. It is late October 1943 at the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard. The air is heavy with the thick, freezing Atlantic moisture. But there is something else in the wind. A sharp metallic taste of ozone burns the back of the throat. The deafening, rhythmic hum of massive magnetic generators vibrates through the concrete docks. Moored in the dark water is the warship Eldridge, a massive steel destroyer. Officially, this is a routine test to make the hull invisible to magnetic torpedoes. But the sensory experience of the sailors on deck tells a vastly different story. A strange, eerie green fog begins to roll over the cold steel of the ship. The temperature drops violently. The air pressure suddenly shifts, popping the ears of every man standing near the hull. The air crackles with pure static electricity, raising the hair on their arms. And then, the blinding flash of displaced photons completely swallows the massive warship. For a terrifying, silent moment, the Eldridge simply ceases to exist in our physical space. Only a deep, empty hole remains in the churning ocean water. When the ship allegedly rematerializes, the physical toll is catastrophic. Witnesses described a scene that defied every known law of biology and physics. The agonizing cries of sailors echoed through the shipyard. The sheer force of electromagnetic displacement had reportedly fused human flesh into the solid steel bulkheads of the ship. The sheer horror of this outcome was the perfect excuse to shut the door on the unified field forever. But we must ask if it was truly just a tragic accident, or if it was the ultimate justification to bury a technology that threatened the masters of the world. We must ask ourselves who actually benefited from the failure of the Eldridge. This is where the historical record ends and the deliberate suppression begins. Many historical theories suggest that the military and their corporate allies realized this technology would destroy the global economic order. Public opinion at the time Heavily rumored that the naval industry, the oil barons, and the transportation monopolies were terrified of absolute freedom, which allegedly led them to bury the research. Surviving documents suggest the true ambition of this project was never just radar invisibility. The actual goal was spatial displacement, teleportation. If a 300-foot steel destroyer could instantly jump from Philadelphia to Norfolk, the implications were absolutely terrifying for the establishment. Systematic suppression is the natural immune response of a power structure facing extinction. The elite minds behind the global logistics empire understood the math immediately. If you can move 300 miles in a second without burning a single drop of diesel, the entire foundation of their wealth collapses overnight. The global elite did not fear the technology failing. They feared the technology succeeding. Let us look at the geopolitical landscape of 1943. The world is consumed by a massive war driven entirely by logistics, oil, and the slow, brutal movement of heavy machinery across vast oceans. The powers that be were building an empire of scarcity. They built their fortunes on the friction of distance. They profited from the slow transit of coal, the monopolization of shipping lanes, and the desperate need for heavy fuels. Whispers in the scientific community claimed that the minds behind the project, brilliant physicists exploring the unified field, were systematically silenced. We have to wonder if it is a coincidence that the files regarding key researchers mysteriously vanished shortly after the incident. Official explanations state that the project was a failure and the mathematical theories were dead ends. But independent investigations suggest a highly coordinated effort to erase the fundamental equations from public academia. Whatever the cause, the suppression was absolute. Logs were reportedly confiscated. Generator blueprints were allegedly classified under the highest levels of national security. Independent investigators claim they launched massive disinformation campaigns to make anyone who spoke of the green fog look completely insane. They reduced a terrifying leap in human evolution to a cheap ghost story. Reportedly, the brilliant men who understood the unified field were either absorbed into dark military projects or ruined completely. The corporations could not allow a reality where energy and transit were free. A world without distance is a world without borders. A world without borders cannot be taxed, cannot be controlled, and cannot be kept in a state of perpetual dependency. The physical sensation of teleportation, that sudden shift in air pressure, and the absence of inertia was deemed too dangerous for the public. Not physically dangerous, but economically fatal. They looked at a future where humanity was untethered from the earth, and they panicked. The fear of chaos, the fear of losing absolute control over the global supply chain, the terror of absolute freedom. These were the driving forces behind the shadows. Many theories suggest that the corporate entities funding the war effort issued a silent ultimatum. They demanded the end of the unified field experiments. They demanded that humanity remain chained to combustion engines and slow-moving cargo freighters. They chose the slow death of the planet over the rapid death of their monopolies. Let us dive deeper into the weeks leading up to that fateful October day. The Philadelphia Naval Shipyard was a hive of nervous energy. The sheer scale of the magnetic coils wrapped around the Eldridge was entirely unprecedented. Workers reportedly felt a constant, low-frequency vibration in their teeth just walking past the dry dock. The air in the surrounding blocks smelled distinctly of copper and burnt static. Dogs in the neighboring streets would howl endlessly, driven mad by the sub-audible frequencies radiating from the military base. This was not a quiet laboratory experiment. This was the brute force manipulation of reality. When the generators spun up to maximum capacity, the localized gravitational field allegedly warped. Tools dropped by mechanics did not fall straight down, but drifted sideways. Compasses spun violently out of control. The men involved knew they were piercing a hole in the universe. They could feel the unnatural cold seeping into their bones, a cold that did not come from the Atlantic wind, but from the terrifying void between dimensions. And watching from the shadows were the architects of the modern world, the industrialists, the men who owned the steel mills, the railroad networks, and the vast underground oceans of black oil. Public opinion at the time heavily rumored that these men had embedded observers within the naval intelligence ranks. They were not there to ensure the ship won the war. They were there to ensure the technology did not survive the war. Imagine the absolute dread gripping a transportation magnate as he watches a multi-ton warship disappear and reappear miles away. In that blinding flash of green light, he sees the complete vaporization of his entire empire. If the military can teleport a destroyer today, tomorrow, the public will demand teleportation for everything. We must ask why we build highways that break after 40 years. We must ask why we lay thousands of miles of railroad track. We must ask why we drill into the earth for toxic sludge to power clumsy internal combustion engines. The unified field theory threatened to elevate humanity to a higher civilization overnight. It was a leap that would definitely bypass the entire industrial age business model. The systematic suppression we see today was born in that exact moment of corporate terror. They realized that whoever controls the distance between 2 points controls the wealth of the world. By eliminating distance, the Eldridge threatened to eliminate the ruling class. So the narrative was aggressively rewritten. The horrific side effects, the men reportedly phasing into the bulkheads, became the perfect weapon of mass deterrence. Was the biological horror a natural consequence of the physics? Or was it a deliberately engineered sabotage to ensure the project was deemed too dangerous to continue? Many historical theories suggest that the calibration of the magnetic fields was intentionally altered at the last second. A calculated flaw introduced to create a gruesome spectacle, thereby justifying the immediate and permanent termination of the research. Official records state the project was scrapped due to the unacceptable loss of life and the severe psychological trauma inflicted on the crew. But independent investigation forces us to ask a darker question. We must ask if they mourned the sailors, or if they celebrated the failure. The traumatic aftermath provided the ultimate cover story. They sealed the files. They scattered the surviving crew members. They dismantled the massive generators and melted down the copper coils. They salted the earth of the unified field theory, so nothing would ever grow there again. Whatever the cause of the disaster, the resulting blackout on the science was incredibly thorough. We are left with a carefully curated history, a history that tells us we must remain slow. We must remain dependent on massive polluting infrastructure. We must pay the toll at every border, at every gas station, and at every shipping port. The timeline where we slip effortlessly through the fabric of space was murdered in its crib. This suppression is the invisible cage surrounding our modern society. Every time you pay for a plane ticket, every time you fill a gas tank, every time you buy goods marked up by exorbitant shipping costs, you are paying the tax of a lost timeline. You are financing the very same monopolies that allegedly buried the key to our absolute freedom. While these rumors lack official verification, the coincidence is hard to ignore. The sudden halt of such groundbreaking physics right at the precipice of success is highly suspicious. We are told the laws of physics prevent instant transit, but data suggests those laws were merely written by men who sell us the fuel to travel the slow way. The timeline fractured right there on those freezing docks. The warship Eldridge was not just a ship. It was the tombstone of our lost future. Let us analyze the deep mechanisms of this fractured timeline. If the unified field technology of the USS Eldridge had not been suppressed, the butterfly effect on human history would be absolute. Our modern society is built entirely on the friction of distance. Moving massive amounts of physical matter requires immense kinetic energy. That energy requires fuel. That fuel requires a global infrastructure of extraction, refinement, and transportation. This is the blood that pumps through the veins of the global economy. If you introduce electromagnetic displacement into this fragile ecosystem, the entire structure shatters. Free and instant transit would obliterate the petrodollar. It would lead to a complete collapse of the global banking system. Think about the sheer scale of the global supply chain. Millions of trucks, thousands of cargo ships, fleets of freight aircraft. They all exist because we cannot instantly move an object from one set of coordinates to another. But in 1943, the minds behind the Philadelphia experiment reportedly solved the coordinate problem. They proved that physical space is just a mathematical illusion. If you can warp the magnetic field around an object, the object simply slips through the cracks of reality and reappears elsewhere. We must use sharp contrast to understand the tragedy of our current reality. They mapped the fabric of space-time in 1943. We still burn fossil fuels to move metal boxes across the ocean. They allegedly figured out how to fold dimensions. We still pave the earth with asphalt and sit in gridlock traffic. The absurdity of our technological stagnation is staggering. We are using primitive combustion engines to navigate a universe that operates on quantum mechanics. Imagine the complete death of the geopolitical border. National boundaries are defined by physical geography. Rivers, mountains, and oceans keep populations contained. Armies guard these physical borders to control the flow of goods and people. But you cannot build a wall to stop a unified field. You cannot put a customs checkpoint between dimensions. If electromagnetic teleportation became the standard mode of transit, the concept of a nation-state would dissolve. Absolute freedom of movement would make oppressive regimes impossible to maintain. This is exactly why the technology had to be buried. Many historical theories suggest that the ruling class realized teleportation was the ultimate democratizing force. If a citizen can step into a displacement field and vanish into another country, you can no longer tax them. You can no longer draft them into endless wars. You can no longer control them by cutting off their supply lines. The military and their corporate allies were terrified of a world where they held no physical leverage over the population. Let us explore the profound transformation of human living spaces. Today, our cities are dense, polluted concrete jungles. We pack ourselves into tiny apartments simply to be close to our places of work and global commerce hubs. The value of real estate is dictated entirely by proximity. But if you possess the power of instantaneous transit, proximity loses all meaning. You would definitely live in a serene cabin in the snowy mountains of Norway and commute to a bustling laboratory in the heart of Tokyo. Your morning commute would take exactly 3 seconds. The urban monopolies would collapse overnight. The mega cities would empty out, allowing humanity to spread evenly and peacefully across the planet. The sensory experience of this lost future is both beautiful and haunting. Imagine walking into a commercial transit terminal. There are no roaring jet engines. There are no fumes of aviation fuel. The terminal is perfectly silent, except for the low, rhythmic hum of the magnetic coils beneath the floor. You step onto the displacement pad. You feel a sudden, sharp drop in ambient temperature. The air smells heavily of ozone and charged copper. The pressure in the room shifts violently, popping your ears. For a fraction of a second, the light in the room bends. You experience a complete absence of inertia. A blinding flash of displaced photons washes over you. And then, the cold metallic air of the terminal is instantly replaced by the warm, humid breeze of a tropical island. There is no motion sickness. There is no travel fatigue. Just the pure, instantaneous transition of matter. But we do not have magnetic terminals. We have airport security lines and delayed flights. We must ask if it is a coincidence that the files regarding key researchers mysteriously vanished. Is it a coincidence that the brilliant minds working on magnetic resonance in the early 1940s either died in obscurity or were absorbed into black budget defense programs? Whatever the cause, the suppression of the Eldridge data was absolute. The official historical record claims that the great scientific minds of that era simply hit a wall. They tell us the mathematics of the unified field were too complex, too unstable, and ultimately impossible to practicalize. But independent investigations and surviving documents suggest a vastly different narrative. Whispers in the scientific community claimed that the mathematics were perfectly sound. The instability was not in the physics. The instability was in the human reaction to the physics. The military-industrial complex looked at the absolute chaos a borderless, fuel-independent world would cause. They saw the end of the oil cartels. They saw the end of the naval shipbuilders. They saw the end of their absolute dominance over global logistics. So they allegedly chose to manufacture a failure. Theories suggest they took the terrifying physical anomalies reported by the crew of the Eldridge and weaponized them as propaganda within the scientific community. It is widely rumored that they made the very concept of spatial displacement synonymous with biological horror. By framing the technology as a horrific, deadly mutation of physics, they ensured no respectable academic institution would ever touch the subject again. They severed the branch of physics that dealt with gravitational manipulation and forced all scientific funding into the development of nuclear fission. They traded the clean, silent potential of teleportation for the loud, toxic reality of atomic weapons. They chose the power to destroy the world over the power to connect it. Let us dive deeper into the mindset of the suppressors. You must understand the sheer terror that grips a system when it faces absolute obsolescence. Imagine the boardroom meetings that reportedly took place in the shadows of the Pentagon and Wall Street. These were men who controlled the veins of the earth. They controlled the railroads. They controlled the shipping fleets. They controlled the crude oil pumping from the deserts. To them, the unified field was not a scientific miracle. It was an apocalyptic weapon aimed directly at their ledgers. They understood that whoever controls the friction of reality controls the people. If it takes 6 weeks to move food across an ocean, you can charge a premium for that food. You can control the geopolitical leverage of the nations starving for that food. But if food can be displaced across the globe in 3 seconds, hunger becomes a choice, not a profitable inevitability. Poverty becomes obsolete. And to a system built on exploiting poverty, obsolescence is the ultimate enemy. Look at the wars we have fought since 1943. Look at the millions of lives lost in conflicts over oil fields, pipeline routes, and strategic seaports. Every single drop of blood spilled in the name of resource logistics is the direct result of that timeline fracture. We fight brutal wars over crude oil because the men in power allegedly locked the alternative in a vault. They enforce a reality of scarcity because scarcity is the only environment where their power has any value. The butterfly effect of that single cover-up echoes through every aspect of your daily life. It is in the exorbitant price of your groceries, shipped across oceans on vessels burning heavy toxic sludge. It is in the crumbling infrastructure of our highways, pounded into dust by millions of heavy trucks. It is in the smog that chokes our major cities. We are living in a primitive, restricted simulation of what our civilization should have been. This is the core of the tragedy. The technology did not fail us. We failed the technology, or rather, the flawed, terrified humans in charge of our destiny made a tragic but logical choice to protect their power. They looked at the boundless horizon of a hyper-connected universe and chose to build a cage instead. They convinced us that the cage was natural. They convinced us that the slow, grinding pace of our logistics is the only way the world can operate. While these rumors lack official verification, the coincidence of the suppressed data and the subsequent rise of the petroleum empire is hard to ignore. We are left with fragments of a dream. We are left with the haunting rumors of a green fog and a disappearing warship. The evidence is buried under 80 years of classification, denial, and coordinated ridicule. What do you believe actually happened to the incredible promise of the unified field? Do you think the human race was robbed of its ultimate evolution? We look around at our crumbling world today, and we assume this is the best we could possibly do. We assume the gridlock of our highways and the choking smog of our cargo ports are the natural cost of human existence. But the tragedy of the warship Eldridge forces us to confront a far more terrifying possibility. We do not lack the technology to save the world or to eliminate global scarcity. We simply chose the timeline where corporate profit and geopolitical borders were considered infinitely more important than human progress. The architects of our reality looked at a seamlessly unified universe and decided to sell it back to us in fragmented, expensive pieces. Every single time you stand at a fuel pump watching the cost tick upward, you are paying a direct tribute to the men who allegedly buried the unified field. Every drop of heavy diesel burned across the Atlantic Ocean is a massive monument to their terrifying need for control. We could be stepping effortlessly through the fabric of space, traversing the entire globe in the blink of an eye. Instead, we are completely chained to the Earth, dragging heavy metal boxes across the water because it is highly profitable for a select few. The true ghosts of the Philadelphia experiment are not just the sailors who reportedly fused with the steel hull. The ghosts are all of us. We are living in a crippled, restricted simulation of the future we actually deserved. The blinding green fog of October 1943 did not just swallow a military destroyer, it swallowed our absolute freedom. What do you think about this lost timeline? Do you believe the unified field was deliberately suppressed to protect the global energy empires? Or do you think it was truly just a catastrophic failure of physics? Let me know down in the comments. If you enjoyed this journey through history, please hit the like button and subscribe to Timeline Divergence for more uncovering of the paths we never took. Until next time, stay curious and keep watching the timelines.